Hello again, everyone. This is Climate Astrologer Witness. It's been a long time since I've made a video. I wasn't ready to do another one, and it's been almost a year. I have come across something recently that gave me the impetus, the focus that I wanted to be able to explain more of my orientation to astrology. So, I'm going to read something from an author. He's writing a book called Dark Ecology. His name is Timothy Morton. Here is a paragraph. We can trace the ecological crisis to a logical program that has been running unquestioned since the Neolithic. Ecological reality requires an awareness that at first has the characteristics of tragic melancholy and negativity, concerning coexisting inextricably with a host of entities that surround and penetrate us. And of course, he's talking about animals in the wild and the bacteria and parasites that live within us, but which evolve paradoxically into an anarchic comedic sense of coexistence. Ecological awareness has the form of a loop. In this loop, we become aware of ourselves as a species, a task far more difficult than it superficially appears. We also grow familiar with the logistics of human, social, psychic, and philosophical space, a 12,000 years set of procedures that resulted in the very global warming that it was designed to fend off. That 12,000 year is when agriculture, the very, very beginning infant stages of agriculture and civilization started. That's when hunter-gatherer societies slowly started to settle and everything started to change. The logistics represses a paradoxical realm of human-non-human relations. The realm contains trickster-like beings that have a loop form, which is why ecological phenomena and awareness have a loop form. The growing familiarity with this state of affairs is a manifestation of dark ecology. Dark ecology begins in darkness as depression. It traverses darkness as ontological mystery. It ends as dark sweetness. That really explains my journey. I began studying climate change around 2005-ish, a little before maybe, but by the time 2011-ish came around to 2012, I really understood more in depth about how the situation goes farther back than even just fossil fuels. It is the behavior of human beings that is pushing, that is driving the ecological changes on this planet. Fossil fuels put it all on steroids. But now this paragraph, how it starts out saying that the realization of how our species affects this planet to such a degree, and then it brings about this apathetic, nihilistic orientation, possibly for a while it did with me, but as you progress and work through certain things and connect with other people who can help, you come to terms with it and realize the process of a species in its existence. And you can more or less accept. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still times, and within me, I'm still upset with how here we're supposed to be a conscious species, aware of and intelligent of our actions and how they bring about consequences, but yet we've allowed such destruction, and most of that is based on allowing certain of those in our civilization, culture, society to have so much power through the monetization of our ecosystems and our resources, and they wield it with no regard whatsoever for the consequences. And so there are days when I still find it extremely difficult to let that go, because we've known long enough what our imprint, Bigfoot imprint, is on our culture, on our ecological systems. When you realize that the environmental movement that started decades ago, even before the 60s and 70s, but it started growing more then, the perception of it is that, well, we have to fix this over here and then we'll be okay, and we fix this over here and we'll be okay. You know, cleaning up the water here, making companies take care of these brown sites here, you know, but not understanding that it's the same, what we're doing to the planet is the same thing as this. If you took, I might have put this in the other video, if I did, here it is again. If you took your body and poked holes in it, you know, fairly deep, they didn't have to be that deep, somewhat, and scraped off a bunch of skin and whole different areas, and started taking, you know, little tiny bits of poison here and there every day, all day, and burned yourself a few times here and there, and didn't feed yourself enough water, and didn't eat right, fed yourself terrible stuff, what's that going to do to you? Well, the earth is a whole system, and when you're doing terrible things to every little part here and there, it ruins and changes how that system works and functions. Our gallbladder can get messed up, our thyroid can get messed up, our brains can get messed up, so that it's not the different parts of our body isn't working correctly, which affects the whole and eventually kills off the whole. So that's exactly what we're doing to our planet. When they talk about the Gaia theory, and they talk about the planet is doing this or that, you know, it's not really so much that they're saying the planet is thinking in the way that you and I think, oh, I'm going to get rid of them, or I'm going to do this, but that the systems, the ecological systems on the planet are trying to rebalance themselves. So they so they do this, you know, that's what happens. It's just like our atmosphere has to get rid of all that energy. So a hurricane happens, okay, to release that energy. So now, let me go in the direction I was going to go in. As far as astrology goes, I am feeling and have felt for a long time that it's so important that when you're doing readings for people, that you are talking to them and helping them understand that they are an individual within a wider system and an even wider system and then a wider system. And yes, astrology is a practice and a study that understands that we are part of the cosmos. But when you're talking to an individual and you're trying to help them with their lives in any way, we have to help them grasp that the events that are happening because of climate change, societal changes, it's going to affect them. They're not separate from that. We know as astrologers that the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are generational. They affect particular generations. Can you imagine those born now with Pluto and Capricorn, what their orientation is going to be to institutions, large institutions and societal structures? I mean, it's inborn in them to transform all that. How they will do it, or will they want to wield some kind of power building indestructible systems? every planet and every sign has that possibility of going either way, positive, negative. Now, so by studying and reading many different subjects, or as many as you can, feasibly grasp well enough, it's going to help you in your discussions with people while you're sitting with them. So, and not everybody is very science oriented. I grasp that. My Scorpio and my Sagittarius, I'm a digger. I love my research courses in psychology. That was great. But I always wanted to find out the truth. Even when I was in my mother's kitchen in high school, I stood there one day and said, I need to know the truth of everything. And I was kind of oriented towards, I was still going to church probably with my girlfriend at the time. And so I'm speaking here to some people who haven't yet come to terms with the whole religious science orientation thing. So belief systems are very personal, and it's very difficult when you're confronted with a situation that doesn't match your religious, spiritual orientation. So now I'm going to mention, if you're very, very into, and I was, and I've met other people who still are, we came from somewhere, and you're very attuned to that story of Adam and Eve and the first people, the first humans, and you're trying to grasp and learn more, and it just draws you, how the beginnings of our existence as human beings began. Okay. You know how you really answer that question for yourself? Read some anthropology. Read some evolution. And some people here are way far ahead and into that already. But if you haven't gone in that direction and you're only looking towards conventional religion for those answers, I gotta tell you, this beginning of the world stories are not just in Christianity. They exist in every culture, and many of them are way older than Christianity. Trust me. So they represent archetypal tools to help us understand ourselves, our inner conflicts, our societal conflicts. They're there to help us. You could say, if you want, that some of those people that wrote those stories were the first people who tried to do sociology, or as astrologers were the first psychologists. Those people were trying to lay down a foundation for societies to work. They missed the mark, and sometimes it helps with what they came up with. It is important as populations grew, and we weren't like so isolated after being settled. We were growing food, and food was more plentiful as we were able to grow so much we could store it. And somebody had to have, power over that to distribute that food. Yes, these kinds of things changed us drastically. This video is much more organic than my last. I wrote out my last, but I would love to be able to convey that studying astrology has been a very enlightening journey for me, and it has pushed me into the direction of reading science and history. So I'm really here to express to those who are still looking only in one area to get the answers about our beginnings, our orientation in the universe. You have to broaden and read about different subjects. Look other places for answers. when you begin to understand the evolution of the human race, it still brings mystery. I mean, can you just imagine hunter-gatherers traveling across regions and the medicine man woman that they had and their experience? I mean, there was a really good book that I was reading, The Naked Ape, that was good. And then there's another one, novels by, oh dear, I can't remember his name right now. It's science fiction, but it's not future necessarily. Um, he starts out covering a hunter-gatherer tribe, people who were just becoming conscious of being who they were, conscious of themselves, straggly, little families, walking across trying to find food, etc., and meeting up with another. And then he follows that strain of human beings all the way down. I've only gotten to the part that's probably around times of Phoenicia, the ships building and all that, the Phoenician navies and all that. I haven't gone past that yet. It still brings mystery and amazement at our travels through and how we evolved into different cultures, and how our belief systems and our societal mores that we developed over time. Now we're at a place where we've been able to exchange so much between ourselves, between societies, between cultures and peoples. It's got to bring about another change that's just as drastic as coming out of the trees and then learning how to handle fire and then learning how to settle down and make societies and settle civilization and agriculture, which was the beginning kind of our downfall. I've said before, this is my interpretation of getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's the story that developed over probably 100 generations of how we went from walking through forests and jungles and finding whatever we needed was right there, just get it, to then settling, but why we settled and then how we settled, we might have been finding that really wasn't what we thought it might be within the first few generations, but we kept doing it, and then finding, we had to work more to get what we wanted. We had to work in the fields and then, yes, childbearing. In the Bibles it says, you will find pain, women will find pain. Well, that might be a way to explain how, stories that were passed on from generation, from thousands of years before, that women didn't have trouble with babies because the heads were smaller. This is a scientific fact, that species that we came from, similar to us, their heads weren't as big. As we evolved, our heads became bigger because our brains became bigger, so that women had more problems birthing children. These stories that have been passed down come from somewhere. And it's a way to explain all the changes that generation after generation after generation went through. And each story, yes, gets morphed probably from the beginning. The beginning might have been the real story. But over time, the great grandkids lose track and they make their own adjustments to the story. And then it's like a mystical thing, So this is one time that I would like to just orient anyone to be able to broaden your understanding of science, of anthropology, sociology. Do those things, read as much as you can, and then, when you're doing a chart for somebody, you're not going to sit there and explain all of that necessarily. But, as I was mentioning in the other video, you're not going to sit there and talk about how great their life's going to be, because we can see that with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and how this hasn't happened since 500 years. I mean, we are going through something now, and one of the things that I was looking up also, around the time of the Crusades, that was the last time that we went through another theme change like we're doing now. Does that mean things are going to get better? I am not optimistic because, see, we have made such drastic changes to the planet. They're not fixable. There's a point at which you destroy your body so much the doctors can't do anything for you. Now, that seems really negative, I know. To me, it would take a miracle. And I'm not talking about some entity coming down to save us. I'm talking about us getting our act together as a species and just stopping. I'm not talking about green energy. I'm not talking about keeping this civilization going that we have, where you can go run out and buy some stupid plastic cupboard to organize your kitchen. No, I'm not talking about those things. Those things are not necessary. When you go back and you start studying our hunter-gatherer ancestors, you begin to see us stripped down. That was before astrology. But you know what? Another thing I'm going to bring up. Astrology is a man-made thing. The labels, the names, but guess what? It's also in nature. When you're talking about Aries, you're talking about spring. That is something in nature. We just happen to label it. Humanity names things. So these things in nature, we name them. We named spring Aries. We named the time right after that when it starts, we named it when it gets a little warm and the soil is warm and things can grow. We named that Taurus. And then as the little sprouts and grass and flowers start to spring up and reach up towards the sun and spread out, we named that Gemini. Then we continue to fall and we get to Scorpio when everything starts to die off. We named it Scorpio. We just named what is already there. So in nature. So I'm going to call it a day, and I hope this made some sense. I'm open to any comments, and I will try to see if I can put on the link for the article and the author I was talking about, and maybe some other helpful links. Just start studying. Broaden your grasp of our origins, your grasp of where the planet is at, and I think it will be very helpful when you're working with people, and sociological issues also. Thank you. Bye.